and lands a deck that certainly, as the format has gotten more and more fair, has picked up here in Modern. Long on the play starts with Mox Diamond, just getting rid of Maze of Ith, discarding that, playing Exploration. Could be one of those real good hands. It's Tropical Island and Thespian Stage says go. 3 mana sources on the first turn. It's totally reasonable.
A Dark Depths away from making it 2020. Kevin Jones, Verdant Catacombs, casting a Deathrite Shaman. Deathrite Shaman, pretty reasonable against the lands deck. If he starts going for Life from the Loam, you can get some stuff out of his deck before, or out of his graveyard rather, before it matters. The question is how quickly Long can just naturally end up with the Dark Depths in his hand.
Yeah, I mean, that's the great part about lands, right, is that, say Kevin starts trying to turn off a Loam engine, Long could just play Dark Depths land go here.
Mm-hmm. And Kevin is 4-color, not white. There's no Swords to Plowshares here. 2020 Indestructible is going to be lights out.
All right, go back to David Long. He's just going to play Dark Depths. That he has enough mana to make the 2020 this next turn. And I want to look at Kevin's list. If there's a 2020 in play, how does he get rid of it?
I believe that Kevin is actually just stone cold, but there are theoretical cards that Long has to be concerned with. On turn 3, Kevin could make a Liliana of the Veil, and by untapping, Long is exposing himself technically to, I guess, Stifle plus Wasteland. Kevin does have some Jace the Mind Sculptors in his deck, but he's too low on mana to make that matter, though he's a Baleful Strix to block.
So buys him a turn. And David's going to make the 2020. Sure, let's get some chump blocking for the Strix. Did that in response to the card draw. Now we go back to David Long. Kevin's at 19, so the lethal 2020 is there.
Mm-hmm. And still just 2 total mana sources for Kevin, so casting Jace the Mind Sculptor, not a realistic proposition. He needs to buy more time.
Yeah, I mean, he has to find it, and that's his, I believe that is his only way to remove a 2020.
Mm-hmm.
So it swings, so Kevin blocks. See a hand of Abrupt Decays, Lightning Bolt. It's all great stuff for a different matchup.
Right. Certainly once you're behind the 2020. Not really going to matter here.
We go back over to Kevin Jones. Another Dark Depths made by Long. He does not have another stage. Kevin has at least 2 more Baleful Strixes, so he's got some time.
And with that being the case, Long really wants to find a Wasteland.
To stop a potential Jace if Kevin manages to find one.
Mm-hmm.
Here's another land, so Kevin has up to 3 mana next turn. He can cast another Deathrite. He has plenty of mana now.
Yeah, and he found the 3rd land as well, so a Wasteland, it would take 2 Wasteland effects.
I suppose David could crop rotate for something like a Tabernacle.
That certainly swings the mana away from Kevin.
If you want to stop Kevin from getting to Jace, that would work.
Well,
he's just gonna play it from his hand. How about that?
Drawing it naturally is pretty good too.
Says go. So Kevin, upkeep. He's gonna exile both of David's lands to keep his shamans alive. He still has at least 1 Baleful Strix left, but now he's gonna have to chain a lot of draws together. He needs to Strix into lands. On top of that, he needs to find Jace. He needs David to not draw another Thespian Stage. He's not dead, but he's real close.
Yeah, he's in a lot of trouble here.
Not to mention, I think David Long does have a crop rotation, so he could start wastelanding Kevin. And I guess Kevin did pick up I was going to say he picked up a Force of Will, but he has 5 cards and none of them are blue. So he actually can't use Force. He's got a Lightning Bolt, a Hymn to Turok, some Abrupt Decays. Good stuff for a different matchup.
Frequently, the lands deck has to take the route of setting up Life from the Loam, maybe gambling for the Loam in the first place, but Long's deck just giving a lot of good stuff right off the top.
Well, and Kevin's multiple Deathrite Shaman draw actually would have been very good against that kind of strategy.
Yeah, exactly.
He's going to pay for his creatures and use. He's going to go ahead and use Inquisition of Kozilek, and in response, Long is going to crop rotate. I guess he could find another Thespian stage. That's pretty good too. Yeah, that's what he'll do. So now if Kevin even draws the Jace and plays it, he's still dead?
Yeah, it's just a backup 2020 waiting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah, Kevin didn't have that blue card for that Force of Will there for the backup, and he still can't solve the first 2020.
Now, interestingly, much like you see out of Shardless, Kevin has 2 copies of Wasteland in his deck as opposed to 4. It's kind of using it not to try to deny mana to your opponent, but to use it to answer utility lands. It's a different, right? You know, you want a couples, you can remove a Dark Depths. You don't really want to just like go. You want your lands though. You don't just want to go at your opponent's mana.
Mm-hmm.
And David will continue to hit. Another Baleful Strix hits the graveyard. That's the 3rd one. But Merit Lage keeps on coming. Shamans. An upkeep. There still are 2 lands in the yards. Kevin can keep them alive. He's using 1 shaman to make a mana to pay for the other one.
Allows him to go into his main phase with 4 mana sources.
Yeah. He'll ponder. He did not find Jace yet. But it even doesn't matter here. I'm curious what Kevin's looking for.
He very well, part of this play pattern, it kind of bluffs the existence of Liliana in his deck. There's still that Thespian stage backup.
Yeah,
doesn't
yeah,
really accomplish anything.
He has to beat it. Either way, he doesn't even find that. So game 1 is going to go over to David Long with lands. A quick 2020 proves to be too much for the 4-color deck.
It used to be the case that lands won so slowly that as soon as you were behind, you were supposed to concede. But, you know, that game didn't even take 8 minutes. Kevin could afford to just cast that cantrip, maybe make Long overthink something. Yeah, so we go to sideboards here for David Long. He has 4 Sphere of Resistance, 3 Krosan Grip, 3 Sensei's Divining Top, a Gilded Drake, a Crucible of Worlds, a Chalice of the Void, a Bajuka Bog, and a Worm Harvest. Some of these options are reasonable. Crucible of Worlds for Wasteland against these heavy 3-color decks is totally reasonable. Chalice of the Void is going to be mostly for combo decks, has a Sphere of Resistance. Some argument for Worm Harvest to grind these decks out, though it does lose a lot of value against Deathrite Shaman.
So I'm interested in this. Normally in a land sideboard, we see Tireless Tracker, Krosan Grip, and then some card like Chalice of the Void or Sphere of Resistance. Instead of Tireless Tracker, David Long is going for Sensei's Divining Top as his value sideboard engine.
Yeah, it's a really good card against these kind of fair decks to kind of control the top of your deck. You have a lot of fetch lands, high access to that in lands. It's kind of like a draw 3.
So out of the sideboard then, normally in this matchup, the lands player would bring in their value card, like a Tireless Tracker. Do you like Sensei's Divining Top here then?
It seems totally reasonable.
And you also mentioned Worm Harvest. That one, I wouldn't be surprised to see that as well. Now, David Long is a player with a lot of victories and of his own here on the SCG Tour, almost all of them coming in Legacy. The 32-year-old from the DC area has 6 open top 8s. We see him, we just see him at the Legacy events. Also a doctorate student, has a complete doctorate in chemistry. And one thing, so we see him a lot with this deck. One of his innovations here is that Sensei's Divining Top is actually used as an answer to Surgical Extraction in this matchup.
Sure, yeah. Well, you have the top on the battlefield and loam in your graveyard. If they cast Surgical targeting it, you can use the top to draw a card, replace that draw with the dredge. Now that Life from the Loam is in your hand, no longer a valid target for the Surgical Extraction.
It's really a neat one there. So now we go to Kevin's side. Last game, Kevin basically lost because his deck was very unable to answer a 2020. Mentioned once it was in play, he was on 2 Jace, and that's it. So he either has to fight the post. There's 2 ways he can fight it. He can either try to stop David from ever making Merit Lage, or he can try to board in ways to remove Merit Lage. What does he have available?
So he has 2 copies of Surgical Extraction, which can fight over Life from the Loam. That card's totally reasonable. Invasive Surgery for much the same reason. And then he has a Wasteland and a Life from the Loam himself, which he's not as good as David's deck is executing this game plan, but sometimes you just want to counter or hope that there's no exploration and try to play that game.
So those all seem reasonable. Does he have to board in some number of these Diabolic Edicts just so game one doesn't happen again?
Yeah, he just doesn't want to find it. He just was so slim. His first answer to the 2020 cost 4 mana, and that's just unacceptable. So the Edicts help bridge that gap a little bit, stops the runaway games. It's going to be pretty useless in a lot of the other games, though if he had the usual Tireless Tracker sideboard plan, it's reasonable there, though he does not have it.
Yeah, so it's kind of an insurance against the 2020. You're right, there is no Tireless Tracker. Outside of that, there is no creature to hit, but that one's certainly a relevant one.
Mm-hmm.
Do you expect, I guess, Flusterstorm not great here, it just counters Loam?
Loam and sometimes Crop Rotation. It doesn't seem terribly effective here. I guess I gamble the other one.
In this kind of deck, a lot of times when you see the 4-color deck win, it's really a control matchup where he often wins with something like a Deathrite Shaman,
right?
Nothing else.
Deathrite Shaman did a good job of making the lands matchup against fair decks not as favorable as it used to be. The Shaman has a lot of relevant text, both the ability to be a mana source that's not attached to a land and to exile lands from their graveyard. It does still just die to Punishing Fire, but it is a very significant card.
Kevin keeping on 7 here as the players enter a second game. From Kevin, it's going to be a Deathrite Shaman on turn 1. Among the better things he can do. We see a Diabolic Edict showing up there as he shuffles.
Mm-hmm.
That one has been boarded in. Last game, David made 3 mana on the first turn. This time he'll make 1. It's Taiga. There is a gamble in David Long's hand. He wasn't able to use it, though, because of the Deathrite Shaman in play here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if he gambles for Loam and it ends up in his graveyard, the Shaman can just eat it.
And it looks like on Kevin's side, he might just, turn 2, he'll just cast Leovold. If he gets to untap here without too much damage being done, this is all the threats Kevin will need to win.
Yeah, he has plenty of damage on the battlefield here. Leovold itself pretty resilient to Punishing Fire as an answer. If Long has to set up casting that twice, Kevin will at least get to draw a couple of cards. He also gets to draw a card every time he gets Wastelanded now, because Leovold just allows you to draw a card anytime any of your permanents are targeted.
That card's really messed up.
It's super messed up.
If that ability only was on himself, it would still be good. Exploration here from David. That'll resolve.
That's something you can do when you print these straight to legacy cards. You can put a pretty absurd text box on them.
So he plays a land, exploration, and a Tabernacle. This will do some damage. I suppose Kevin still has to make sure that he doesn't just get 20-20'd by David also. That's like what happened in the first game.
Mm-hmm.
And now his mana is going to be taxed. Pays 2 to keep both his creatures alive. A Ponder, the draw for Kevin. He actually has plenty of lands right now.
And Kevin able to easily pay for both of his threats and also just leave the Shaman active if he so desires.
Well, here's where Leovold will help, right? You'd said that normally here David would be looking to start wastelanding away Kevin's mana with a Tabernacle in play.
Mm-hmm. Kevin would be able to draw cards. Once David actually gets going, he can really overcome that card advantage. Kevin only has so many things that actually matter.
If he can get Wasteland Exploration, he'd have 2 Wastelands a turn, and that's good enough.
Right. Doesn't matter how many cards you draw if you can't actually cast any of your spells.
Sure. Ponder from Kevin. I guess next turn, David, if David has a Wasteland and Loam in hand, he could just go waste one of your lands, Loam it back, waste one of your lands, go, and then that's bad for Kevin. That's like, yeah, sure, he's got a lot of cards,
I will agree with your analysis. That would be bad for Kevin.
Yeah. Now, fortunately, Kevin has picked up a copy of Invasive Surgery off the Ponder, and he leaves Deathrite Shaman up. So he actually is not going to get hurt by that. Invasive Surgery counters a sorcery, like Life from the Loam.
And while Kevin does not have Delirium, he can at least counter the Loam in the first place and then just exile it with the Shaman.
Wasteland or Reach It in Port, it looks like in David's hand. Now, Port is something I definitely don't want to use with Leovold in play. Sounds horrible.
Yeah. Tap your land, you draw a card.
Yeah, I guess. So Maze of Ith and Reach It in Port. Maze of Ith is another card that... This Leovold card's messed up.
It does stop David from taking damage, I guess. But yeah, Kevin gets to draw a lot of cards.
Ugh. It's just anytime you target anything, it's just... That's so rude.
Leovold also breaks up some of the fancy lines that Long has available. If Kevin decides to make these fights over Life from the Loam in David's graveyard, if we get to that point in the game, Leovold makes it so David actually can't draw a second card on his turn.
So how does David stop this Leovold from happening without letting Kevin draw 100 cards?
Maybe Kevin misses his Tabernacle trigger.
Yeah, that's probably not. I mean, Leovold swings for 3.
There are some engineered explosives in Long's deck. 3 copies in the main deck.
Okay, that sounds excellent. Now, he only has 3 mana available, 5 lands, but...
I assure you that he will draw more lands before the game ends.
He's going to attempt to crop rotate away his Maze of Ith. Imagine he's getting Thespian Stage here. He just wants mana-producing lands. Might as well get half his combo.
And the nice thing about Stage is it can copy a land while it's just hanging out. So he can copy one of Kevin's lands that produce a 3rd color that he cannot currently produce.
You're right, he actually can't make engineering explosives on 3 without the help of one of Kevin's lands.
Yeah, just 2 red-green duels with the Taiga and the Grove of the Burn Willows currently. Kevin has no shortage of blue mana available. He could just copy Underground Sea, then he'd have access to that. Not that Long can do anything with this mana except for make Sunburst colors on the engineered explosives.
Right now, looks like he did not copy there. Confirm that. He also did it verbally, perhaps. Gamble, Crop Rotation, Life from the Loam, all in David Long's hand.
It's like a Punishing Fire is the 4th card.
Just says go. He's kind of getting out-controlled, out-prisoned by the prison. You know, the prison deck's getting out-prisoned here. That's what I was trying to say.
Yeah, Kevin's able to just keep hitting his land drops. He's just hasn't missed a land drop yet, and David has not wastelanded him whatsoever. He's yet to produce a wasteland. So Kevin's just able to easily pay for this Tabernacle, controls this Leovold that makes it hard for Long to interact with him without just giving Kevin more materials, and Kevin also just hanging out with this Deathrite Shaman.
Brainstorm end step by Kevin Jones. And it looks like there will be a Punishing Fire from David Long. He's going to shoot the Deathrite Shaman. Has Grove of the Burn Willows in play. Kevin's going to draw. He has a copy. His hand is Baleful Strix, Invasive Surgery, and Colligan's Command. So first Kevin draws off Leovold. Draws Abrupt Decay.
Kevin probably wants to activate this Deathrite Shaman when it's on its way out the door. Though if he does that, if he has to use mana from his fetch land, he kind of loses that impact of his Brainstorm. Can now just exile a land.
Punishing Fire moved out of the graveyard. That's still on the stack right now. Kevin's going to exile the Maze of Ith. And then Deathrite Shaman is down. Punishing Fire resolves. Kevin has a mana floating, and Brainstorm is about to resolve.
And when the Brainstorm resolves, he will have Delirium to go with that counterspell in his hand. The Invasive Surgery. Whereas previously he would have to use the Shaman to kind of do a 1-2 punch on anything he wanted to exile.
Cracks fetch land after putting 2 back. Remember, we're still on David's end step here. And Abrupt Decay will get cast on the Exploration. And we had a mana floating off that Deathrite Shaman. And now Kevin untaps. Upkeep, you still got to pay for Leovold. He'll do that. It feels like Kevin has established control of this game. May take a couple turns to walk it in, but
it's Kevin gesturing at David's Rishadan port. He's like, "You sure you don't want to port me?"
Yeah, that sounds great.
I'd only draw a card.
Ponder from Kevin.
Kevin plays Ponder in the true spirit of the card. You never see him snap off a shuffle or a keep. Got to think that one over.
So right now, Kevin just seems to be on a game plan where he's trying to deal 3 damage a turn with Leovold and basically use the rest of his cards to contain David's strategy. What else is he going to need to kind of make sure David doesn't break through free of this?
So he's got to stop David from comboing him. So at some point, he wants to get access to his own wasteland. You get that Thespian stage off the table. That'd be really nice.
So just if David draws the Dark Depths next turn, say, that there's still a hole in the armor there.
Right.
As far as cards like Life from the Loam matter, he's covered.
He still has that Invasive Surgery in hand, so he can deal with that. That becomes an issue.
Yeah, he actually has Delirium as well, so it would hit. They would exile all the loams.
Right. Cast Instant and Sorcery himself, has some fetch lands, and David killed his Deathrite Shaman for him. So 4 card types.
So he gets David down to 11.
Kevin's deck, he has 2 main deck Wastelands. That was only the 3rd in the sideboard. So he doesn't have access to a full 4. That is certainly a card that he would like to produce somewhere pretty quickly, actually. Of course, as long as David's not actually comboing him, he's on a pretty short clock. David is already down to 11. Kevin still has that Leovold just attacking.
That's how Maze Surgery as a 1-mana spell. He's able to leave it up very easily. You see Kevin playing a replacement Deathrite Shaman.
That's just a wash on mana against the Tabernacle with a lot of upside.
Yeah, there's so much upside, especially because Kevin has all these lands. He actually can just, yeah, I think it's part of the control plan here. He's got Baleful Strix as a blue card, so he has Force of Will, blue card, and Invasive Surgery in hand. And then between these two creatures, he figures that should be enough.
And even if David just gets back Punishing Fire and kills a Deathrite Shaman, well, Kevin at least gets to draw a card.
Right, which David almost has to do. He's going to get back Punishing Fire. They're working out what the timing of it is here. Not entirely sure it matters.
No.
You go back over to David Long.
It's still a good amount of cards in Long's hand, just not really able to produce anything material here. Kevin's very far ahead. That Leovol's enabled him to draw a couple extra cards. He's produced enough lands to really get through every way that Long is taxing him. He would need to have produced a Wasteland this game to really make any kind of impact, and he'd also need a way to recur it on top of that. He does already have the Gamble, so theoretically, if he produced a Wasteland, he could start setting up Wasteland Life from the Loam. And I believe he has Crop Rotation if he wanted to set that up as well. The Leovold does throw a wrench in that armor. It's not clear he can actually do any of that fast enough, on top of the fact that Kevin just draws a bunch of cards.
So it's going to be a gamble from David Long. And that's going to get hit by, looks like Invasive Surgery. I mean, right, he'd be gambling for Dark Depths, and Kevin really can't have that. So Surgery's going to work. David Long is going to lose all the gambles from his deck.
Yeah, and there's some argument. You might think, Life from the Loam is the most important card in the land stack. You kind of want to sit on this for that.
But
because he can just gamble for the land, you can't interact with that with any of the stuff in Kevin's hand. Fighting this battle is great, and exiling all the gambles makes it so Long has to top deck exactly the Dark Depths.
So gamble's gone. We see the hand of Crop Rotation, Life from the Loam, and Punishing Fire. So Crop Rotation's still pretty real here, actually. Now Kevin has Force plus blue card, so he's got it covered for now.
Yeah, it's pretty tough for David to win this game by casting spells.
Well, if he goes for Crop Rotation here, Kevin actually is out of cards, right? So it's not impossible here, and he can still just, if both players are on the cards, David can still top deck Dark Depths.
Yeah, there's still some play going on here, for sure. He can also set up Punishing Fire, get that Deathrite Shaman off the table, cast Loam, start dredging. He has a small window to actually dredge through some cards to help find that. Not a ton of time, with him down to 11.
Only 3 gambles exiled. There's 4 in David's list. Apparently he's boarded one out, or Kevin just missed it. Checked twice, though. So, and David making no moves just yet. Has to pay for both his creatures. Kevin will draw. His hand is Force blue card. The blue card is Baleful Strix. Really no reason to cast Baleful Strix into a board with the Tabernacle on it.
Yeah.
And I believe Kevin picked up Surgical Extraction.
Yeah, that one's not bad.
A swing from Leovold puts David down to 8.
Just another layer to add to the problems that Long already had with the Deathrite Shaman. Now if he can deal with the Deathrite Shaman, Kevin just has a surgical waiting in his hand. He can deal with any kind of problematic graveyard shenanigans that way.
Floating a colorless, David will attempt to Crop Rotate away the Rishadan Port. Kevin does have this covered. It's going to cost him his Force of Will, though. And he really has to. Otherwise, 2020 is on its way, and I don't think Kevin has an answer. So, yeah, here's Force pitching Baleful Strix. Says no to Crop Rotation. Surgical Extraction not really playing here, though. See whether...
So some argument for Kevin to just surgical the crop rotation right now so that Long can't just draw that, and that's more copies of the Dark Depths.
Yeah, and also we were talking before about the Rishon import play. David not making it because he doesn't want to draw Kevin a card.
Yeah.
And is he going to go? He is going to Punishing Fire the Death right now with that mana. So Kevin will draw a card off Leovold. Right now, David not leaving up Grove of the Burnwells as he's not able to.
Yeah, Kevin could actually hit the Punishing Fire with this Surgical if he so chose here.
Right. That actually goes all the way back to an earlier turn where David didn't end step turn Thespian Stage into a red-green land. He just didn't, there was 3 mana up. And this is with that on the stack, it's going to be a Brainstorm from Kevin. So the Brainstorm, the card he drew off the Leovold trigger. The sweetest thing is when they target your guy and then the Leovold trigger draws you into a counterspell for it. Kevin did not find a counterspell. What he did find is a Wasteland, which seems so good here, as that finally will protect him against the combo.
Yeah, if he's able to get into his next turn here, that Wasteland is mighty powerful.
So still with Punishing Fire on the stack, Kevin's going to use Deathrite Shaman to exile the crop rotation. David goes to 6. Now Deathrite Shaman is dead. Now David takes his turn. He draws Dark Depths or crop rotation here, then we're in business.
So I think that is a crop rotation.
So the play you mentioned before, if Kevin had surgicaled the crop rotations,
they would have
stopped this, yeah. So now David has a play of immediately crop rotate a land for Dark Depths, make it 20/20, say go. If David doesn't do it main phase, though, Kevin's Wasteland will put an end to it. Now this play does not play around Jace, so that it's not clear which way he wants to do this.
Yeah, he's playing around one thing or the other thing.
There's 2 Wastelands in Kevin's deck and 2 Jaces. So it's not.
It is 3 wastes post sideboard, but it's still not a very high number anyway.
I think the issue now tell me about this. I think you'd want to play around Wasteland, because if you're playing around Jace can Brainstorm and find Wasteland, so it's more likely that Kevin has Wasteland. Because his Jace draws sometimes have both.
Sure.
David's going to play around that he does not main phase make it. Now Kevin drops Wasteland.
And at this point, David has long since crop rotated away his Rishon import, so he can't just tap the Wasteland down. It's also a little light on mana to make a play like that as well.
Yeah, and this may have cost David big as he goes down to 3.
David can still peel Wasteland and fight the Wasteland battle.
He'll just have to draw. If he draws Wasteland here, he's got a chance. And it may be that he doesn't know Kevin's list as well. Like, how many Wasteland does Kevin have? How many Liliana? How many Jace? These are really good questions that David just doesn't know.
Right.
So David says go. Kevin pays for his Leovold. Inquisition of Kozilek from Kevin. Loam and Exploration. Kevin's got him. Takes Loam. Swings for lethal. David will attempt to make a 20/20. And Wasteland does such a number on this, so what happens is that you let them get through most of the combo. You let Thespian Stage become a Dark Depths. You let them sacrifice the one with counters on it to the Legend rule. Then with the trigger on the stack, you Wasteland the stage.
I mean, you have a lethal attacker anyway.
Yeah.
So
at a different, what I mean is, okay, it doesn't matter here because he's dead. At a different point in the game, it's if you go for the combo into a wasteland, you don't just lose one land, you lose two.
That's bad.
And that game goes in the direction of Kevin Jones. A tough call at the end on David's side. He had to pick. He had to pick which card to play around, and he picked wrong. It may be the right pick, but simply didn't work out. We're going to a third game.
Right. He main phased it, respecting Force of Will with the crop rotation, and then respected Liliana or Jace the Mind Sculptor by waiting, but played into Wasteland.
So back to the sideboard here for David. And maybe if you're not positive on Kevin's list, and these 4-color control lists are actually very diverse right now, you might just want to go with the results. Like, I guess up until that point, he had not seen a Jace, he had not seen a Liliana, and he actually hadn't seen a Wasteland in the deck up until then. So he has so little information to decide what to play around off of. They're all possibilities in the deck.
I would put Kevin Jones on having Jaces in his deck for sure. I mean, he's Kevin Jones. But Wasteland,
yeah.
Wasteland's hard to dodge.
Right, I mean, and then it's like a question of how many. I mean, probably he's playing some number of Wasteland, but probably not 4.
It's difficult to fit 4 Wasteland into a 4-color deck. It's a lot of spots for lands in your deck.
So for Kevin Jones, a 3-time competitor in the Star City Players Championship, also a member of the U.S. Nationals team, the 29-year-old from Kingston, New York, 10 Open top 8s and 2 Open wins. Also, just quite an interesting guy. Also an avid tennis player, and one Eternal Weekend legacy with Blue-Red Delver. And that was a while ago.
Oh, yeah.
Kevin used to kind of be the Jeskai Delver player. He's really branched out into a lot of archetypes at this point.
Like Jeskai Saheeli, 4-color blue legacy deck.
This is a control deck. I guess what I mean is it used to be that Kevin would take the control decks and then build the most aggro version of them.
A lot of Mantis Riders have been cast by Kevin Jones.
Right here for a third game. David got to see a lot of the sideboard from Kevin. He didn't actually see the surgical extractions. At no point, Kevin had one that went uncast.
Yeah, being able to hide that you have access to that card can be very significant.
He did see invasive surgery. That card's no fun for the Lance deck.
No. Yeah, there was a time where people played some number of Envelop in their legacy sideboards.
It's like almost the same card, right?
A small upside on it.
All right, well, we start the game here. Game number 3, 12 minutes remaining. Mox Diamond, the first play for David. He'll go with Exploration. This feels a lot like the first game. Was the exact same start. And David ran away with that one. He just powered out the combo, and that was the end of the game. Can he do it again? Cast plays Rishadan Port and Grove of the Burn Willows, says go.
That turn 1 Port matters a lot more than Port against Leovold.
It's pretty gross. It's going to be a Deathrite Shaman from Kevin Jones. And I believe, does he have Punishing Fire in the opener? That's, yes. And Grove of the, this is great.
Yeah.
It's great. Sign me up. Grove of the Burn Willows, Punishing Fire. Opener, just take care of that 1-2.
And David will still need to find something to actually be proactive, but he's doing a great job of stopping Kevin from playing the game.
Oh, look what he's doing. Okay. He's respecting surgical extraction here.
If you have the Punishing Fire in your graveyard and your Grove is tapped, you can't just return it to your hand. So he won't be able to use Port on Kevin's upkeep on the following turn, but he at least gets to block against Surgical with his Grove of the Burn Willows.
So he does that, says go. He won't be able to get his Punishing Fire back if he wants to make that play. Like, we'll see how much he respects it. Ponder from Kevin. Right, if he taps to try to get it back, then Kevin has a window to Surgical it.
Right.
That's until David has another Grove of the Burn Willows, and then he just gets it whenever.
Just having the Punishing Fire in your graveyard until you want access to it doesn't really cost David anything.
Ponder by Kevin. He finds a Wasteland, but chooses Scalding Tarn and is going to make another Deathrite Shaman. We'll see if this is enough pressure to get David to play into Surgical.
Yeah, David probably wants that one back to deal with the Shaman.
His hand is Crop Rotation and one other card. But if Kevin's playing this, you kind of have the read that Kevin has surgical, right? Like, if he didn't, I don't know that he's masterclass bluffing here if Kevin doesn't have surgical. You know, here's an X2, don't kill it.
Yeah, just dies to this card that you get back for free.
And David's taking a good long thought as to whether, and yeah, he's going to respect surgical. Draws for turn. He has a crop rotation, so he could, you see he plays Taiga here. He could try to bring back Punishing Fire, and if Kevin exiles it, he can rotate into another Grove of the Burn Willows. And he goes for it, and now Kevin says, yeah, I don't have one.
And currently, David doesn't really have either half of his combo, so using the crop rotation for that is reasonable value as well.
And Punishing Fire down the Deathrite Shaman. And thanks to crop rotation in his hand, he still has Punishing Fire when safe from surgical extraction. That hasn't changed.
Yeah, it would take surgical plus a counter spell.
See Jace the Mind Sculptor, Snapcaster Mage, Brainstorm Wasteland in Kevin's hand. Is David going to keep going? He's eyeing that crop rotation. He'll do that, sacrificing Taiga. I assume this is for Wasteland.
Yeah, wasting off of that Underground Sea. The Badlands is not a particularly good land.
Pretty
aptly named.
Yeah.
Pretty aptly named in Kevin's deck.
The Badlands.
I will get the Badlands.
I'm going to say the Badlands is not a good land. That's.
Yeah. It can cast Deathrite Shaman. That's really the highest upside.
Don't even get Ryan started on Scrubland.
Oh, no. Gene Richmeyer, if you're watching, I got some words about Scrubland for you.
So wastes Kevin down to one land, and Kevin, he'll fight that. He'll Wasteland back and play a Deathrite Shaman. And now, does David Long have life from the Loam? If this was all set up to get Loam into play, then bravo. I guess he would lose the Loam, right? If he casts Loam here, the Deathrite Shaman's going to get to eat it.
Right. He'll just have that in his graveyard.
He's going to do it, though.
Kind of betting against Kevin, have another black source, but leave Scalding Tarn still in Kevin's hand.
Gets back. Grove of the Burn Willows, Taiga, Wasteland. Pretty nice. Doesn't have a way to protect the Loam. So he'll just play Grove of the Burn Willows. Oh, yeah, he can play 2 lands. Oh, Exploration's great.
Yeah, that card's not bad.
Wastes Kevin off the last mana source.
If only he could play 3 lands.
And says go. Kevin has no land. Has 1 in hand. It's a fetch land. Scalding Tarn. Hand Snapcaster, Jace, Brainstorm. Kevin, he's got to get rid of that Loam, right? This is his last. Like, there's no waffling on this one. Kevin will crack his fetch land. In response, David gets that Punishing Fire back.
If he gets rid of the Loam, David still has access to Rishad and Port. That can tax Kevin's lands.
Yeah, and
but it gets a lot worse if he has life from the Loam on top of that.
I mean, yeah, there's some problems here. David's play is going to be to Punishing Fire your Deathrite Shaman, Rishad and Port your Underground Sea. I mean, yeah, it's some good stuff. Kevin has Brainstorm. He can cast it in response to Rishad and Port. Maybe he can find some more lands. He needs to not lose in the meantime.
Right.
We'll see. David draws. Looks like another land.
Odds of that are pretty high.
Dark Depths on Taiga he plays for the turn. He actually has a good clock here as well. Crop Rotation is his last card in hand, so he can set up the combo.
Yep. Because the Dark Depths does not tap for mana, he can't Punishing Fire,
can't do it all,
and Crop Rotation, but he's pretty happy just doing 2 of these things.
And Kevin should be suspicious here. David said go and let Kevin untap. And Kevin knows that David has Punishing Fire and just isn't doing it.
Yeah. If Kevin taps out, just going for Crop Rotation, going and finding Thespian Stage, and going for the combo, that'll do him in.
Brainstorm from Kevin Jones. Now is David gonna? I guess he's now thinking about that last game where he lost to Wasteland. He's thinking, no, maybe not.
Wasteland or Kevin drawing Force of Will off of the Brainstorm itself.
Yeah. Looks like Taiga is going to be the land that's going to rotate away. And that's right. Does that work? If it works, he's just going to get a 20/20.
Kevin not presenting the mana to generate most things to deal with the 20/20. Kevin can still find a land at Diabolic Edict right now.
Yeah, he does have 2 in his deck. We saw that he boarded them in. So David gets Thespian Stage. And he's going to make a 20/20, most likely with his Brainstorm on the stack. Just wants nothing, does not want to see a Wasteland show up on Kevin's side. So he makes the 20/20. Here's Merit Lage. If Kevin finds a land, his Deathrite, he can make a Baleful Strix here. But I guess there's a Punishing Fire in David's hand.
Yeah.
Okay, which they both know about. And Kevin didn't even find a land.
That looks like David Long is going to close this one.
Yeah, a bunch of Brainstorms, Strixes, Snapcasters.
I really like the way that David navigated this game.
Yeah.
The aggressive crop rotation for the Wasteland put Kevin in a position where he's really not even playing at this stage of the game. He had very slim outs here, and David takes it down.
Yeah, and I think what's really great is a lot of times, this is what impressive, you see lands, like when people first learn lands, they think of it as a prison deck, and they play for the prison element.